hearing on April 4th. Would you all please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Select Board Member Bernard has a personal problem and will not be with us tonight. And if I could have an approval of the minutes of March 21st, please.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed? None, thank you. At this time, if there's anybody with any new public business that's not on the agenda, your hand went up first, very good. Nope, Bob. No, you're third, sorry. I looked to the right and then the left.
Hi, Nova Assembly Town Meeting Member, Precinct 1. I'm curious if there's been any updates on the Resilient Danvers Casper plan that was originally going to be, there was going to be a plan at the beginning of this year, and I haven't seen anything recently.
Yeah,
So
I
I'm
haven't
not
seen anything recently either. I've attended 2 of the last 3 meetings. I know Mr. Game has attended them too. I think they're kind of gathering everything together to make a presentation. Do you have any idea, Mr. Manager?
That's a good summary. I'm getting a nod as well from the Assistant Town Manager. So it's-
Stay tuned.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bill Bradstreet. Oh, you want to go last? Okay, that's fine, Mr. Gamer. And gentlemen, I don't know your topic, but this should be something that you want us to be aware of or to ask a question, and we do have a time limit on new business.
Thank you.
Okay, Bob Gamer, and we're speaking as individuals. The opening of each Human Rights and Inclusion meeting, we say an invocation in the name of indigenous people displaced to form the town of Danvers, the land we're now standing on. Not being alive at the time, we are not responsible for this action, but members of the board, of the Select Board, we are certainly accountable for it. With this in mind, there are 5 bills on the Massachusetts Indigenous agenda pending in our state legislature. We are respectfully asking you to read these bills. You each have a copy now. And at the next Select Board meeting, send a letter to the State House endorsing these bills. Although we cannot take back what has been done to the Massachusetts Indigenous people, we can throw out our hands in support and some fellowship with them by making this endorsement. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Do you have another copy?
Didn't he put one there? No? Oh, did I grab yours? You're welcome, Martin.
Anyone else? That's it, Bob? Thank you. Anyone else? All right, Bill, you're last.
Bill Bradstreet, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 1. 3 quick ones. Is Pope's Landing a dog park? When I and my wife go down to drink a cup of coffee and enjoy it, all I see are dogs watering the trees. That's question 1. Question 2, how is the progress in getting permits to unclog the silt from the mill pond so it can be cleaned up, dressed up with some native plants to make it a showpiece like the library is? And third, can we find it in our way to take the land at the corner of Maple, Hobart, and North Putnam Streets by eminent domain and turn it into a park that would be a nice showpiece for the square of the town of Danvers? Just 3 questions, thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any comment, Mr. Manager?
I actually missed the 3rd one. I'm sorry.
Yeah, what was the location of the 3rd one?
Maple Street, Hobart, North Putnam Street, that large piece of land that looks beautiful now that it's empty, it would look even better.
Are you talking the lot next to,
Between Hobart, North Putnam, and fronted by Maple Street. The buildings are gone, it's been leveled, it would make a nice park for the Danvers Square if it was grass, nice trees, couple of benches, something that, again, it would be a showpiece for Danvers. Other communities have.
we'll have to review the plans for Maple Square, because I'm not too sure exactly where you're pinpointing, and I know there's some of the.
Right across from the old firehouse.
The whole property?
Well, it's certainly a good part of the corner, Maple Street, Hobart,
Where the
North Button,
where the new apartments are going in?
where I'd like to see a park, not apartments.
You're gonna see parking.
I'd like to see.
You're gonna see parking, that's what was approved.
Can't we take the land by eminent domain and do the right thing for the town? Please?
Good question, thank you, Bill. Eminent domain, all right. Thank you. Anyone else? No, okay. A public hearing will be held on 2 Danvers Electric Division poll positions. Number 1, poll petition number 202-30214-1 dated February 14, 2023, requesting permission to locate poles, wires, cables, and fixtures, including anchors, guys, and other such necessary sustaining and protecting fixtures along and across the following public way or ways. 1, Locust Street. 1 new Danvers Electric sole-owned pole number 13C-115-1 and anchor. This pole is required for the town of Danvers Lakeview Ave pump replacement project. 2, poll petition number 202-30214-2, dated February 14, 2023, requesting permission to locate poles, wires, cables, and fixtures, including anchors, guys, and other necessary sustaining and protecting fixtures along and across the following public way or ways. Bremen Street, to install 1 new Danvers Electric pole, sole-owned pole number 34-13 and anchor. This pole is required for the proposed electric line upgrade in this neighborhood, and somebody must be here to speak to this, and you are?
Kelly Kobrensky from the Electric Division.
Welcome, Kelly.
Thank you.
So I'm going to ask a quick question. These poles already have identifying numbers,
Yes.
and how does that happen?
Each street has a route number,
Yeah,
so we just kind of go with whatever makes sense. So on Brahman Street, we have 12 poles. This will be the 13th.
okay, so it's route number 34,
Yeah.
and this is the 13th pole.
That's correct. And every now and then you'll see a half in there when we just have to squeeze one in.
Okay, interesting. I'd never asked that question. I don't know why, but now I know. Thank you. Continue.
Yep, so the first one that we have is for the Lakeview Pump Project. The town came forward, requested that we set a pole that could be used for a riser pole to feed the new pump. And the second one, we are doing upgrades. You can see us working now on Holton Street. We'll be continuing to Fletcher, Brahman, and Pine Street. And the pole on Brahman is just required to support the larger cables.
Thank you.
Electric Division did also reach out to all of the abutters prior to the meeting to make sure there were no concerns, and we did not hear from anybody.
Thank you. Questions, David?
Nothing, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Matt?
The anchors for both poles, are they located on public or private property?
The anchors will be located on public property.
Okay. And there'll be kind of a horizontal pipe or whatever to kind of put some tension on the anchor wire?
Brahman could potentially have 2 anchors, depending on the pole location. One will be in line with the poles, and the other one will probably be like you're saying, a piece of conduit with an anchor right in the back of the sidewalk.
Okay.
Lakeview, there is a grass strip with a lot of room, so that will probably just be a down guy.
Okay. And you mentioned no response at all from any of the abutters. What was the criteria for notification in terms of distance?
Just the direct abutters.
Okay. All right. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Gardner?
On the diagrams, there's the spot location, but then an arrowed line. What does the arrowed lines represent?
I apologize that there's not a legend on here, but those would be the anchor positions.
Okay. And unrelated, how high are our poles above ground?
Above ground. So on these, let's see, Brahman will be proposing a 45-foot pole, and it will be 10% plus 2 feet, so about 6 feet, so
Okay.
maybe 39 feet.
Okay, thank you. I have no questions, thank you.
Thank you. It's a public hearing. Anyone in the audience with questions? Hearing none. What's the will of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I move we accept both poll positions.
We'll close the public hearing
Oh, I'm
first.
sorry, Mr.
Yep.
Chairman, I move we close the public hearing.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And Al, what's the board, I'm sorry.
Do you want to take the votes individually, or?
I would prefer to take them
Okay.
individually.
Mr. Chairman, I move we accept the application poll position for number 2023-0214-1 on Locust Street.
Is there a second?
Second.
Questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Thank you. Second.
Mr. Chairman, I move we accept the application poll position number 2023-0214-2, located on Brahman Street.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? None. Thank you, Kelly. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Good. The board is in request of an application for a first-time block party for Falcon Feast by event coordinator Michael Trainer on Maple Street, June 27, 2023, with a rain date of June 29, 2023, from 5 to 8, blocking the streets at Elm to Cherry, including a first-time banner request over High Street from June 19 to 25th. And anybody here to speak to this? Please go to the microphone, introduce yourself. And Michael, is it Falcon Feast or Falcon Fest?
Fest.
Falcon
Falcon
Fest.
Yes.
Thank you. Is all the paperwork in order?
It is.
It is, okay. Good. Make your presentation.
Okay, so we're basically Danvers Falcon Fest. We're a new organization in town. What we're looking to do is just kind of bring back some of the events that we used to have in town. We've recently done 2 fundraisers, a comedy night and then a Light Up Danvers Light Tour. And one of the first events we're looking to bring back is, if you remember, Oldies Night. We're looking to do that in the square. And we're also partnering with Danvers Rotary because it's their 100th anniversary. So we're going to kind of just do one big event for both organizations. Essentially, the big difference with this event is it's going to feature a live band instead of a DJ. It's basically going to have the same setup, stage right by that island there. The street gets closed at Cherry Street to, I forget the, Elm, okay, to Elm Street. And it's basically like it's been done before. There's going to be vendors there. We're going to have food. One thing that we are adding is we had put porta potties on there just because that's some of the feedback we got. No bathrooms at some of the previous ones. But we're going to have like games, contests, all stuff like that. We're going to have some local organizations there, like the Danvers Dance Center of Danvers. We're trying to work with like the high school chorus or band, stuff like that. It's after school gets out, so it's a little. But we're just looking to have different groups there. We think we've gone through everything with the town at this point. Oh, antique cars. Thank you, Amy. Was another thing too. Just because it's going to have like a decade theme, so each block is going to represent a different decade. So it's going to basically go from like 50s to 2000s. Is it, Jocelyn? Yes. So that's the theme of it. Questions?
Why don't you introduce the other members of your group?
Sure. Do you guys want to come up and introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. Rebecca Franke. I'm the treasurer of Falcon Fest. Nice to be here.
Hello, I'm Amy Ciancarelli, Precinct 5, and I'm the vice president.
Hello, I am Jocelyn Marchand, and I am the event coordinator.
Thank you and welcome. I've heard your names and read them, but really haven't been able to put a face to the name. Now we can all do that. Everybody in Danvers will recognize you now when you walk down the street.
Uh-oh.
If you want to say anything about the event, I know you planned most of it.
Yeah, so it's definitely a way to liven up downtown. It's been pretty sleepy and quiet in Danvers over the last few years, but there's a lot of passion and drive into bringing these big town events back. We have a lot of people backing us, wanting to volunteer, wanting to help contribute, and a lot of people wanting to attend. The feedback that we get is just, it's exciting, you know, it's makes you proud to be in Danvers and a part of it. So if there's any questions about like the actual event, I can certainly try to try to paint the picture. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. I'm a preschool teacher. And it was a long day, yeah. They were just loud today.
Very good, thank you. We'll go to questions from the board members. Matt?
So, former board member of Danvers Family Festival and managed the Oldies Night for several years, so a lot of work. I think it's great that it's being revived, that concept, and hopefully you'll be able to also kind of, also have other events as well to kind of,
We do plan on it.
leverage the work that you're doing, because there is a lot of work. You mentioned volunteers, that's key to the success. People that will work, not just the day of the event, but, the planning and the coordination, because there's a lot of moving parts. But I wish you success, and
Thank you.
kudos to all of you for kind of, bringing this back and creating the opportunities for families to come downtown and hang out together. It's
Absolutely.
It's great for the town, so, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. David?
Thank you, Dan. I endorse everything that Matt has just said, and wish you well, of course. And I'm wondering, who came up with the name Downtown Rewind?
Actually, it was one of our volunteers. She had kind of thrown it into the mix. We had at one of our open meetings, a few people had thrown a few different names out, and then we actually put it on our Facebook as a poll. And so we took it to the public to kind of vote on the name, and that was our winning name. So
I think it's a
yeah,
great-
it's a
great
great
name.
tribute to Danvers
It
and
really is.
all the decades leading into. Sure.
A community building experience
Yes.
that we definitely need, and you, looks like you're doing a beautiful job planning it. Thank you
Thank
for
you
your
very
efforts.
much.
Mr. Gardner?
No, I wish you well. I've been in conversation with many of you, including Mike, about the logistics of former events, and any help I can offer, I will. I think it's great it's coming back, and look forward to the event.
Cool. Thank you.
Before I go to the audience, to the clerk, what does this mean, first-time banner request?
They want to hang a banner over the square.
Have they been, you approved that already?
No, that's in addition to the block
So
party.
this is
the
two
first
things.
one, Yes.
Okay, so they're requesting the block party and the banner, which is usually separate.
Generally, it's usually one item or the other, but they have requested the block party and a banner, so
That'd be part of the motion. Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Bill, you had a question?
Bill Bradstreet, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 1. The only thing I ask is that perhaps the town can assist this group with sufficient number of trash barrels in the square. To me, it's been a problem in the past. Sometimes they overflow. Maybe they can get some help from the town.
So-
We don't, I can speak to that if you want, Dan.
Well, I'm going to read what it says here. DPW will provide additional trash bags. They will be responsible for changing out trash throughout the event and leaving tied trash bags on the sidewalk, which DPW will pick up at the end of the event. So just the more the merrier.
As long as they're sufficient, that's all I ask for these folks. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, what's the will of the board? I guess we need to approve taking the town space and the banner request, which is usually a separate request.
You can do two votes if you like.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I move we accept the request of accept the application to hold the first-time block party Falcon Fest as described.
Is there a second?
Second?
Second. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, none, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve the application for a banner hanging as presented
On High Street for...
on High Street for the dates of June 19th to the 25th.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Good luck. We'll see you on the 27th.
Thank you.
Thank you. The board will review a draft of the warrant for the May 15th, 2023 annual meeting. Mr. Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. just in the nick of time. The technology appears to be cooperating again, but just in case, I can hear the copier in back, and we're making extra copies of the warrant, so we'll have, one way or the other, we'll have materials. The warrant that we're going to go through or start reviewing tonight is on the town website, so anybody who's watching can go to the town website and search for warrant, and they should be able to find the draft that we're going to be working through this evening and Thursday. The plan tonight, we have really the PowerPoint is just sort of for reference, and it'll show the order that we're going to work through half the warrant tonight. Tonight will be mostly, we had 4 citizens petitions that were submitted prior to the closing of the warrant, and the town clerk's office verified the signatures, so they are all included in the draft warrant. We also have several bylaws, one of which we'll discuss this evening, and then one we'll be discussing on Thursday with the electric division when they're here. So really, without further ado, we'll dive in. The board did receive hard copies of the warrant. For anyone who wants, there were a couple there. I think we do it, so those who wanted them can follow along. No time really that we need to spend on this. We will be talking a little later tonight about the Finance Committee schedule, as the board assigns representation for each of those meetings. But we'll dive right in. As part of our special town meeting each year, the first 2 items are unpaid bills from the prior fiscal year and budget transfers during the current fiscal year. The Director of Administration and Finance did distribute tonight a short list of unpaid bills that departments have presented. Because these are from the prior fiscal year, they require a 9/10 vote of town meeting. If the board has any questions based on the item that Mr. Conley provided tonight, we can certainly answer questions that you may have for item 1 or 2. But these are generally housekeeping items, and Article 2 is required each year because we vote operating budgets by salary and wages and other expense. If one category or the other runs over or projects to run over during the year, then the town meeting has to make a budget transfer so that the budget can close out in a balanced fashion.
So are you going to ask us to vote on these tonight?
We're going to ask for votes tonight, and then these, subject, of course, to, they may look slightly different by the time we finish this process with the Finance Committee.
So then you should read the amounts from
Sure.
and to, unless you want me to do it.
I'm happy to do that. So the first unpaid bill was a $40 Staples bill for the police department. Almost feel silly reading these out loud, but I'm going to do it anyway. The second was a $103 Amazon bill from the police department. The third was $589 in legal services provided by Murphy, Hesse, Toomey, Lehane. And there was a timing issue with the invoice, so that needs to be paid. $1,861 from Veteran Services. This was an Amazon purchase. $435 in the oil line item from Certified Laboratories, which was probably testing that was required. $17 in auto parts from Danvers Motor Company, and $10,800 from Dennis Burke for unleaded gasoline. So again, these are services that would have been rendered in fiscal year '22. The bills weren't presented to the accounting department until after the statutory ability to pay them closed, and so town meeting is now required to approve the payment of these bills.
Any questions from members of the board?
No.
No. Why don't we take a vote on this
I
at this
move we
time?
accept the Article 1 as presented and send it with a favorable recommendation.
Second.
Discussion, hearing none, all in favor? Aye, thank you. Next.
Article 2, the known budget transfers. At this point, Rodney works with the department heads to project out the end of the fiscal year, and because we know these now, we're including them. And again, this list may change slightly, but we have $35,000 being transferred from police personnel to police capital outlay. The police department has a lot of specialized equipment that they use as part of their daily jobs, and this is consistent with past practice. When we know that we're going to have a budget surplus in the police budget, we often will try to buy their smaller capital items that would otherwise be requested from free cash the following year as part of the year-end closeout. So this would be for things like body armor, taser replacement of breaching tools. The second is $13,750 from DPW personnel to DPW capital outlay. One of the things we saw in a number of our vehicle purchases last year is that with inflation and lead times, the quotes that we started the year with were insufficient at the end. So the 13,750 is to cover a vehicle overrun that was approved in last year's warrant. Similarly, the next two are 75,000 from water personnel and 75,000 from water retained earnings. This is to cover the chemical costs at the plant. The price went up, and we had to make a purchase, which put that the operating side over. So we need to make a transfer in order to balance that budget. And then the last one, $55,000 from water retained earnings to water capital. Same story with the DPW. We had some equipment and vehicles in water that we were purchasing last year, and the price when we went to make the purchase was greater than what was budgeted initially. So we would be looking for a vote on these, subject to any additional that the Finance Committee would have to review as part of their process.
Thank you. Questions, member of the board? The motion, go ahead.
I'm sorry, these are encumbrances that will go against the FY23 budget, or will they tap against FY24?
Transfers within the 23 budget.
Within 23, so 23 to 23. Thank you. There's no other questions.
All right. Is there a motion?
I move we accept Article 2 as presented with a favorable recommendation.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Next.
Next, we will go to Article 4, which is it's an item that we discussed at some length as part of the budget process, or the budget workshop on Saturday, March 18th. That is related to a special and that's on page 1 in the warrant booklets if anybody has theirs. It's a $1.5 million transfer from free cash into the Danvers Public Schools budgets so that they can close the year in a balanced fashion, and this frees up and protects the circuit breaker funds that we're going to need in FY24. So again, we spent a good bit of time talking about this on Saturday. I will acknowledge we're joined tonight by Dan Bauer, our incoming superintendent, Mary Wimmers, our super duper superintendent, who has been keeping things moving forward the past year, and Pam Crum from the finance team over at the schools.
Welcome. Any questions, member of the board? We did discuss this on Saturday. Was there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move we accept the Article 4 as presented with a favorable recommendation.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Next, Article 6 in the special town meeting, Planning Board Performance Guarantee. This is a very rare circumstance, but there is a $266,000 performance bond that was held by the bank that financed the Folly Hill subdivision. That project, for all intent and purposes, has been complete for a long time, but the work that the developer was required to complete as part of the subdivision approval remains incomplete. And 99 times out of 100, the developer will finish the work because they don't want to relinquish the bond. In this case, the developer is relinquishing this bond so that the town can complete the work, so that the subdivision is completed as it was approved. So we have the check, and we are required, town meeting is required to accept it so that we can have the engineering department oversee the work.
Questions?
Just wondering why the mechanism is through the planning board.
They approve the subdivision.
And they hold the performance bond in their name?
Legally, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Just unusual, like you said, it's an unusual situation. I've never seen it, so.
Yeah, David said you almost never, David DeLuca, the town attorney, said that you almost never see it get to this point, but here we are.
Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I move we forward the Article 6 as presented with a favorable recommendation.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Next, we're into the annual town meeting, and because we have petitioners here tonight, we thought we would start with the citizens' petitions, and then we can get back into the legislative items after their presentations have been made.
Thank you. And first?
So first is a citizen's petition from Mark Zubarek, Article 33, that's on page 33 in your booklets if you're following along, relating to the real estate payments of pilot payments from Beverly Regional Airport Commission.
Mark, you want to speak to this?
Thank you, and I appreciate that you're moving this forward earlier than 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock tonight.
Citizens come first, Mark.
I really appreciate that. Thank you. The reason this petition has come about is because there has been an awful lot of activity in regards to the noise, the environmental impacts, the water impacts. And what has happened is the residents, abutting residents, have been impacted over the last 25 years. But this is a process that was originally agreed to back in 1997. And that legislation was passed while I was on the board at that time. And that was supposed to be an agreement that was going to take care of the issues in regards to the impacts of our residents. That agreement was to assign 2 Danvers commissioners to the Beverly Airport Commission. And in regard to that, the taxes that were due at that time were forgiven for the assignment of the 2 candidates to the Airport Commission. That system worked for a while because it was a reaction to the incidents that happened at that time when the Beverly Airport Commission and the Beverly Airport itself cut down an awful lot of trees that were adjacent to the airport property, but they were on the, overhanging and impacting the neighborhood. And basically at that time, that was a reaction. That was an agreement that was done, and it was a legislative agreement. And now, since the last 10 years, change in management of the airport has basically changed the rules, and they basically have ignored the residents of Danvers, which holds 170 acres of the property at the airport itself. So after discussion and after going to many, many meetings, I have approached the residents, and I have approached the town hall, and I understand that there's legislative bill that has been filed in regard to this. I don't think it goes far enough. I think what we need to do is go back to the original responsibility of the airport paying the taxes, real estate taxes for the property that's within the Danvers boundaries. So that airport has expanded to a point where the runways that are being planned for expansion again are going to impact the residents on Old Burley and the west side of the airport. That airport west side is right now holding and developing, they have developed a fuel depot for jet fuel, which we don't get any revenue from for taxes. They have built hangars that can be seen from the living rooms and dining rooms of residents that are abutting the area. Now, these are big buildings. So all this article is asking is that we take upon the Beverly Airport for the impact that it has had on the residents in our community. And these impacts are not just to the abutters, but there are flights that are going over our heads right now. Even in my area where I think I'm in Middleton, there are jets coming in at a level where the numbers can be seen on the wings, on the tail.
All right, Mark, so this petition wants us to collect real estate taxes.
Correct.
Okay, so how will us collecting real estate taxes solve the problem of noise, large hangars, jets flying in?
It will.
It won't.
It will get the attention of the Airport Commission that Danvers residents are being impacted.
They have our attention.
The-
They're hiring a new manager. He's coming on board, I believe, in June. I don't
June,
see how
July, right.
collecting taxes is going to solve any of our problems.
Well, the thing is that we, as a town, are not collecting those taxes, but we're looking at different avenues to collect and reap revenue from the taxpayers. The taxpayers in this town are not being compensated for the location of the airport itself.
Okay, thank you. Questions, Gardner?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'm confused by the wording of just this article. I only want to talk about Article 34.
33.
I'm sorry, 33, Article 33. In 1940s, when the land was remitted back to the city of Beverly for management of the property, it included the Danvers land and a calculation of the tax rate. What you cite here, Article 46 of the 1997 town meeting, is really an agreement that said, we want, instead of paying that $6,000 to $7,000 amount, we want representation. So I cannot tell by the way this is written whether you're looking for that to be reversed and we get the $6,000 to $7,000 annually and lose representation, or if you're asking the board to petition the general courts to change the calculation set in the late 40s.
What the article is asking for is to revoke the agreement that was legislatively developed at that time in 1997.
1997. So that will not get us any more money. It will get us the $6,000 to $7,000 we forego now.
That's one piece of it. The other piece is to collect the actual cash value for the property that we have assigned or we own in 170 acres of the property.
So I do have a question, because if a town or city collects revenue from an airport, the law says that money has to go back for the airport operations. So how do we benefit?
It doesn't say that, because we used to collect that revenue in one time in 1990s. So I don't know where the issue is in regard to returning it back to the airport. The airport makes money on flights, landing fees, storage of equipment, on the fuel, and we don't get any of that revenue.
I understand, but I think we need to be clear that if we collect this money, it's ours and doesn't have to go back to the airport.
Right.
And there is legislation that does state that.
Right.
So I'm not sure that this would work for us. But anyways.
I didn't finish my question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right. Maybe through you to the town clerk. The article as written, is that what was the language in the petition?
I believe it was typed as presented.
Verbatim, okay, that's fine. In the explanation is just is an explanation of intent. But the language here in Article 33 is to see if the town will vote to authorize the select board to petition the general courts, which I'm not sure the town can direct the select board to take a specific action, but this talks about permitting the town of Danvers to collect real estate taxes. It does not, to your second point, reverse the Act of 1997, not this language. There are two different things, and that's what I'm trying to get at, is what you're trying to accomplish, because what's written is only that we as a board can petition the general courts, no different than you could. Today, as a citizen, you can go to our town representation and ask, we want real estate, reasonable calculations on that 1940s calculation. It does not, in this language, talk about the fact that you want to reverse the 1997 Act, which gave us 2 representative spots instead of, and forego that 6,000 to 7,000. Let's say call 6,500 for right now. It's between 6 and 7. That's the most we will get if your second point is made and we reverse that, unless the legislation changes that calculation of pilot, which you've already suggested, and correctly so, that legislative action is going forward now on correcting the pilot programs.
Well, there's legislation that I've been made aware of, and this is article, bill number HD 1726, I believe. This is a article that, the bill that's been filed by Sally Kearns to reverse, to capture the taxes that are due.
And this board has already offered, support of that bill, and the town manager has said so similarly. So are you asking for a new bill?
I'm asking for a new bill in support of Sally Kearns's bill, but it needs to reverse the agreement that was made in 1997.
The state doesn't control that agreement. That was a town meeting agreement.
No, that was legislative action.
It was a legislative action based on a town meeting vote that asked for a form of representation different than this. And remember, I was on the airport commission for many years.
Right.
And so I speak from a place of knowledge. And the bill was to allow 2 representatives from the town in lieu of the $6,000.
Right.
Okay.
At
If
that
you
time.
do away with that, if you go back and revert that, which your actual language does not say, your language does not reference, the Article 33 language does not reference the town.
So, Gordon, I suggest we stay with the language presented to us.
Right.
If he has something else, that'd be a different issue.
So
Article 33
Yep.
wants Danvers to collect real estate taxes. That's all that we should be concerned with. Matt, any questions?
Yes. Thank you, Mark, for your time on this article. Can you just clarify for me, are there pilot payments made today from the commission to the town of Danvers?
From Beverly Airport?
Yes.
No,
So,
not that I know of.
so I would be in favor of keeping the representation on the commission, so you don't need to mention that here, and then, get the assessed value and calculate some type of payment from that to kind of offset the impact that the airport has on the neighborhoods under the flight path. So
But-
I think the tax payments plus still have the representation. I think that's my view.
Well, that would be fine, but what I was trying to, the intention was to avert the conflict of the legislation that was passed in 1997. This is a legislative act relevant to Beverly Municipal Airport. And I attached that to my article. And without reversing that, we still continue to agree to, forgive the taxes.
Was that attachment on the petition that the citizen signed?
Yes,
It was part of the petition.
it was attached, right.
Thank you. Any other questions, Matt?
So that sounds like 2 parts, right? So you want to revert the 97 agreement. So is there an article for that here in the booklet?
It was included in the wording of
Okay.
the petition, and this was, the petition requests that the legislation passed by an act of relevance to the Beverly Municipal Airport, Article 47, during the 1997, May 1997 town meeting. This action and the provision shall be vacated. The 2 Danvers commissioners have failed the Danvers residents.
Yeah, they're just token representation, right? They really have, from what I've seen, not really much impact.
They
I mean,
do not. You're absolutely right.
Right. And Are there other municipal airports in Massachusetts that have a scenario where there's representation and also collecting, now I call it a pilot, but that's not really what it would be. It would be collecting the tax on the assessed value of the land.
That has been a difficult task to get down to the nitty-gritty, but there are 26 airports found in Massachusetts that are really mixed in with Boston Logan and, Worcester Airport. And Beverly is one of the smallest ones, and they do pay taxes to some extent. And I just found an article, Mayor comments on the City-County Airport Authority impact statement, and there's tax situations that have been identified in there.
So this is not an outlier, right? So this is,
No.
so other airports have these types of agreements
Right.
with their surrounding communities.
Well, we also have agreements in our town for properties that are being handled within our boundaries, like the water storage, reservoir for Salem. We get pilot payments on that. We have others that are in the town, and that's what we've discussed, and that's what I felt. This is an appropriate time because the Beverly Airport
Mark, I'm going to ask you to
been
pause a minute.
expanded.
I'd like to get some clarification from the manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Mark is correct. Sally Kearns has filed a bill that would apply, as I understand it, the formula in place for the Salem-Beverly, the Putnam Reservoir would be applied to the airport. So there is a bill that has been filed that does most of what Mr. Zubarek is describing. I'm not sure, the seats, the exchange of seats, that was worked out with the city of Beverly. I do know that the Board of Assessors each year has to affirmatively waive the taxes, so I don't believe statutorily that we are allowed to dissolve the taxes. Each year we have to repeat that process. We receive these about 30 minutes before the deadline. We haven't done a legal review of these, so it's unclear to me whether legislatively we would undo those seats or whether the Board of Assessors, with direction from this board, could choose not to waive the taxes effective next year, and we would immediately collect the roughly $6,000 in taxes that are currently in statute and lose the seats. I can't speak to a scenario where we would start collecting pilot and keep the seats that were negotiated as part of that. But I would offer, I mean, Mark and I discussed this in my office. My suggestion to this board would be asking Mr. Zubarek to withdraw this and offer a letter of support to Sally Kearns in support of the bill that's already been filed that does effectively what he's asking this board to petition the general courts to do.
Thank you. Matt, were you done with your questions?
Yeah, just one last thing. So there's a cost to the town for responding to incidents at the airport, and I've seen firsthand where it's significant. It's basically all hands on deck for Danvers Fire, Police, and EMS. So there's a significant cost associated with that needs to be covered. I think that's all I have.
Thank you. David, any questions?
May I make a comment, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
My real estate tax, I live across the street. I've lived there for 53 years. I have no children in the school system, but my mother was one of 10 children of Polish immigrants, and all those kids went through the Danvers school system. And I did too, and I had a phenomenal experience, grades 1 through 8. I have no problems paying now for other people's kids. But I'm like $7,000 or $8,000 across the street for one little house. I don't like paying for somebody's toy at the Beverly Airport. I don't like paying for some rich doctor's subsidized office building down at the Mass General, which has a tax exemption. I went to the prep, but I don't like providing fire, police, roads, water, and everything else that magnificent school uses. I paid for it once. I'm paying for my kids in Danvers. I don't like paying for all kinds of obligations that the legislature imposes upon us. For example, remember when we were funding the youngsters, the homeless youngsters who were up in the motel up on Route 1? It was a great cost to Danvers. There is currently a transportation issue with out-of-community children that costs us a fortune. The legislature has us at its mercy. The legislature is also, on tax-exempt properties, is at the mercy of Boston College, Boston University, Harvard, and all of those colleges that have enough power to mutilate the legislature into never touching what would be a fair adjustment as far as tax-exempt things. I don't fully understand what you're trying to do, Mark, on Article 33. But the flavor that I feel is that I want to be treated fairly as a taxpayer here. And as long as, for example, there are $6 or $7 billion worth of property in this town, and at least $1 billion of it is untaxed, which means I'm paying the water, sewer, police, and everything else for that property. I'm 80 and I'll be dead soon, so I guess I'm not going to be fighting this battle, but it just feels terribly unfair to me. I don't know if this, looking to collect $6,000 or $7,000 is ludicrous. The airport should have to pay the same kind of taxes I do on fair market value, and I don't know if this does it, so I will support what my board thinks is appropriate for this, and
Thank you, David. So, members of the audience, I'll take questions only, not a presentation. Questions only. Bill, your hand is still up?
Bill Bradstreet, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 1. My question is, I have to pay bills. Why are 2 seats on a board that is weighted to Beverly? I'd rather give up the 2 seats and have the money. To me, the bottom line is money to pay bills, just as David said. I don't think it's fair for the town to accept 2 seats, in essence, that mean nothing, and not get some money, or the money that's due us, in return. I don't think it's fair. That's why I think Mark is trying to do. I'm sorry if it sounded
No, that's
like a
okay.
comment, but it's a question. Why?
Thank you. Mr. Betancourt?
Tony Betancourt, Precinct 5, Town Meeting Member, live at 15 Thorpe Circle. We've had a problem with that airport for a long time anyways. The problem that we have right now is we've got the jets coming in there, okay? And there's about 3 or 4 a day to leave there, okay? And they're pretty loud, I'm telling you right now. And right now, little planes, they go every 3.5 minutes, basically, when they do the touch and goes, okay? If you get jets at that volume, okay, you're gonna need the $1 million that they give us to reimburse all the people that live alongside the airport, okay? If you want, I can show you this. This is all the homes that are there. We are the most populated area in Danvers, okay? If you look over here in Beverly, there's nothing.
Okay, Tony,
No,
the
no, the
airport's
question-
not the question, it's the
Well, the
taxes.
question is, you're gonna need every penny of the $1 million that thing is worth to reimburse the people that when all that noise comes in, okay? Because I don't think everybody's gonna wanna live there and pay top dollar, like Mr. Mills said, okay? You're gonna have to reimburse them. I don't know if $1 million will even cover to reimburse all the people living in the flight pattern.
Thank you.
That's basically it.
One last point, Mark.
We seem to be stuck on a $6,000 fee, and that's not true. I went to the assessor's office. There's $40 million worth of value for the 170 acres, plus the buildings and the fuel depot and the access roads that have been developed. If that is collected, according to what this request is, it is worth $1 million of tax revenue.
Mr. Town Manager, can we collect $1 million from them?
We certainly, I mean, Mark knows the answer to the question that he's sort of asking, which is that the Mass General Law set that it is $6,000. It's not $1 million. If the legislature chose to change the law, they could choose to change it any way they see fit. What Representative Kearns has proposed is using the same pilot formula that is in place a couple miles down the road at the Putnam Reservoir. In terms of what that would generate in revenue, I wouldn't dare to hazard a guess tonight, but it would certainly be more than $6,000. I'm not sure where the $1 million number comes from.
Well, the $1 million number comes from $40 million worth of value of the land and buildings, based on an industrial rate.
As I said, I'm not
commercial.
sure what the legislature would ultimately choose to do.
That's true.
That calculation is probably valid, but I certainly wouldn't use that number publicly as anything that we
So
would have
until such
confidence in.
time as the legislature changes the rules of the road, we're stuck at that $6,000 or $7,000. We need to get the legislature to change that.
Well, can we do
So
that?
this doesn't ask to do that. But the rep has already filed something, we've supported it.
Which I'll wholeheartedly support, but I think it needs a little leverage because legislative actions go into the committee and they never come back out again.
No, they go to the committee for the third reading, and then the speaker says, sit on it.
Right. Well, Ted always told us that. So I'm just,
Mark, thank you for your presentation.
thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, you may.
if I might, two things. One is, money is not going to change the operations of Beverly Airport unless it goes out of business. So collecting more money is not going to change the flights, it's not going to change the airlines that come in there, it's not going to change their business model. The other thing I take umbrage to is the two Danvers commissioners have failed Danvers residents. That's an opinion, which you're asking us to make a legislative decision about an opinion. But the Danvers representatives aren't only there to vote, they're there as a conduit of information. That's exactly why I got on the board in the years you're talking about, is we had no one at the airport listening in about the clear cutting of trees that were petitioned by the FAA, and all of a sudden Danvers residents found people in their backyards chopping down 50, 100-year-old trees. Because we had zero representation at that board, they had those discussions for months and months and months, and the representation we had did not tell the neighbors about it.
All right, Gardner, let's stick with the Article 33. We've had many hearings on the airport.
Yep.
So what do we want to do with Article 33?
Mr. Chairman, as the town manager suggested, this has not gone by any kind of legal muster.
Correct.
And I would recommend we table this, or we do not forward it until that legal review has been there. But in effect, the language in the article asks the town meeting to tell the select board that they have the opportunity to petition for better legislation. We're already doing that. And I'm not sure, to me, it's asking for something we're already doing. We've already said we support Representative Kern's pilot initiative.
Well, I want to be respectful to the citizens' petition, but given that I don't think anyone here supports it, I could be wrong. There's other avenues to take. Mr. Manager, would you have a recommendation? I think you just said to
So, I mean,
petition legislator.
The petition goes to the floor of town meeting once it's filed, so the
Right.
board tonight would be recommending favorably or unfavorably or no action. But separate from this process, the board could decide that they wanted to send a letter of support to the representative for the legislation that has been filed.
We didn't do that yet?
We have not submitted a
Shame on us.
We can do that.
Okay, so it's unfavorable or no action?
Mr. Chairman,
It
I
still
move-
goes to town meeting?
Oh, it does. I move we forward unfavorable onto the Finance Committee.
Is there a second?
Mr. Chairman, can we also ask for legal review so we can,
Oh, anything that goes to town meeting will have legal review.
Fine, thank
Yeah,
you.
without a doubt.
Thank you very much.
Is there a second on the motion? Unfavorable? Yes. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
No.
3-1, thank you. Mr. Town Manager?
Don't sit down, Mark. Yeah, 3 in a row here. So Article 34, Citizens Petition, Establish Beverly Authority.
Okay, so this is the Scheme B. Basically, what we need to do is we need to get some kind of legal control of what happens at the airport. The residents, like you've heard prior to me, presentation, are fed up with what's going on because nobody's listening to them. We have an opportunity to investigate somehow through an airport authority to influence the operations by changing the governance of the airport itself. I know you're going to tell me that it's a Beverly Airport, but I believe that it's federal land originally, and it was devoted to Beverly for operations and maintenance of it, and they've done a good job in doing that. But Danvers has no influence on what's going on at the Airport Commission. So this is an opportunity to see if the town meeting will vote to,
So for a point of information, Mr. Town Manager, can town meeting petition the general court? I mean, it sounds a little
Again,
awkward.
this would need to be reviewed by legal, but, I mean, it is not uncommon, when special legislation is filed, it is presented.
Through the town meeting
through the town
body.
meeting. So the town meeting is petitioning. Typically, I'm not sure why the wording is, typically it's the vote to authorize the select board to petition.
Right.
But, again,
which we can adjust, that's not a
No,
problem.
you can't.
I know, but I can, I can suggest it as a amendment to it at town meeting.
But as we've learned before, admissions, you can,
Within
an
the s-
amendment.
Within the scope.
within the scope of the article.
So I think that's where we'll be, Mark. You'll need to get some legal clarification and make an amendment within the scope of this citizen's petition on the town meeting floor.
But, Mr. Chairman, if I might, this is, again, I understand the intent. I get your intent. However, I see a bunch of holes in this that I would like to suggest you consider. One is Wenham has a small sliver of land.
Right.
So Danvers has an unequal portion to Beverly. Beverly has the
bulk of it.
The bulk of
Right,
it.
right.
And so to suggest that each would have equal weight, I'm not sure what supports that.
That's how an authority works.
But the other thing is, this is land controlled first by the federal government, and you're right, the federal government took it by eminent domain from private citizens and then reverted it back to the management by Beverly. That's by law, that's legislation. So if you're asking to change that legislation, that's great. But you can't have an authority that usurps the legislation that's out there and on the books. You can't create an authority, a group of like-minded people that works against the law.
You can petition the legislative action to do that.
But that's not what you're saying in here. You're not citing the legislation that created that municipal board and asking for relief from that, which is what I think you're asking for. And this is a property owned and managed by 3 entities: the Federal Aviation Commission, the Massachusetts Aviation Commission, and the Beverly Municipal Authority that was granted by law.
At that time, right.
So if you'd like to suggest that we should go back and petition the courts, the general courts, or petition for a change to that law, we should be able to cite that law and know what changes you're looking for. Because this just says, I want to create an authority. Well, what authority are you wishing to grant? Is it the authority to stop flights? Is it the authority to tax? Is it the authority to manage rentals? I'm not sure what authority that board would have. And I can't go and vote for this blindly and say, just create an authority that has no structure or outlines.
Well-
Especially in light of the fact that we already have 3 legislative authorities governing it.
Well, we don't. We have one. Really, Beverly Airport Commission is the only authority that's running that airport. See, the airport authority is an independent entity charged with operation and oversight of an airport or group of airports. These authorities are often governed by a group of airport commissioners, similar to what Beverly already does, who are appointed to lead the authority by a government official when the authority of an entity encompasses more than just one airport, in an area harbor and all rail facilities, for example, the entity may be referred to as a port authority. In this case, we are airport authority. And that would be what I'm concerned about, and I think we are all concerned about, is that Beverly is running the Beverly Airport for their own purposes and their own revenue that's coming in from the airport. Danvers doesn't get anything. So the thing is, this is a method of sharing the authority of, of running and the governing the airport itself.
So I'm pretty sure that you've looked at the numbers at Beverly Airport. It is a self-sustaining, and actually less than self-sustaining body. It gets money from the city of Beverly. It doesn't turn money back to the city of Beverly. So it's not that it pays for itself in its maintenance, in its plowing, in its electrical use, all of that. It's not generating funds for the city of Beverly. It's generating funds for its self-sustainment.
But it has also cut off properties and segments of properties for development because that belonged to the airport.
By FAA and MAA laws, you can only put certain properties in that space.
Right.
You can only, for example, they can't just build an apartment. They can't just build any business they want. It has to be aviation related according to the FAA, and the FAA approves that. So they can't just build a storage facility. You think that would be a great location for a storage facility. They can't just do that. They have authorities. It's not just the Beverly Municipal Airport. It is also the MAA and the FAA on top of that, governing what they can do. And I'm not sure how this authority, this very vague authority, what authority you're looking for.
Just as a frank statement, we want to be able to take control of the airport by the adjoining properties, the members from Beverly, Danvers, and Wenham. Right now, Wenham gets tax revenue from the airport. Danvers does not. Danvers has a severe impact to their residents that are adjoining. Wenham probably does not, but this impact is already increasing both in the town of Danvers and in the surrounding communities because of the extension of the runway that's being planned and the number of jets that are going back and forth between locations in New England.
But if your authority comes to fruition, are you suggesting that authority can curtail the number of flights?
Possibly.
No, that is against the FAA law. That would be like saying Danvers can control Route 1 and the number of trucks that come down at it through from midnight to 4 in the morning. It can't be done. Flights, anything above the ground, anything above ground level is FAA, period.
I've heard that over and over and over again for the last 25 years.
Because it's accurate and true. And if you have something that says it's not, I'd love to see it, but I happen to know it's accurate and true. Danvers does not control any, or Beverly Municipal Airport controls only the land, the rental and development of the land. They do not control the flights that come in or out. The FAA controls the tower and where those flights go out and in from. Those are all federal. This is a federally funded facility that gets almost 90% of their funding to stay solvent comes from the federal government. It's exactly like the mass highway, the state highway and the interstate highway system.
You've made your point. Thank you, Gardner. Matt, questions? David?
No questions. I think that I really wish Mark would withdraw this. I don't think this gets where he wants to be. I'm not sure. And I don't think it gets where I'd like to get someday. So
Thank you. Questions from the audience? Questions? Bill?
Bill Bradstreet, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 1. We're residents of this state, we're residents of this town. We represent ourselves. We certainly can to our effort to change the law, a law, any law. So if we have a problem, and it's a law that's not helping us, or the general public, why don't we get the law changed?
I'm with you, Bill. I agree. I'm not suggesting we
Make
don't
it
go
so
after.
it's
No,
fair.
Bill, I'm not suggesting we don't go and change the law. I'm suggesting exactly that. Not create a new municipal group that has no authority to make
I'm
the
not,
changes
I'm not getting
being
into that.
represented.
Just
Okay.
change the law so it's equitable for all parties concerned.
Thank you, Bill. Your point's well taken. What's the will of the board on number 34?
Mr. Chairman, I move we forward this with an unfavorable recommendation to the Finance Committee.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion?
Yeah, right here. So I think it deserves to go to town meeting.
It will.
It will.
Chime in.
Yeah, we're sending on just with an unfavorable recommendation. We can't stop a
It
citizen's
was
petition
mentioned,
at this.
Tabling it. and,
That was
things like
mentioned, but
that.
right now it's going through unfavorable,
Okay.
was the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
No.
Opposed? Thank you, 3-1. All right, Mark. Number 35. Town Charter, Town Manager Act, Committee to update and review to see if the town meeting will vote to authorize the town moderator to appoint a Town Charter, Town Manager Act committee to review and update these documents. So, I guess the question I have is the intent, because first of all, we're a special legislative community. We don't have a town charter. We have a Town Managers Act. It was approved by the legislature in 1949. We, as a board, have discussed tweaking this, the residency requirement for the town manager, the treasurer's position. We don't feel we need to take do an overhaul, but that's just our opinion. And this board has decided and discussed in the past to wait till we get the strategic Danvers report back at the end of the year and follow through with that on reviewing the charter. So, I mean, that's kind of where we're at, but what is your purpose of this citizen's petition?
The last time that this charter was reviewed was back in 94, 93, before our time on the board.
No, I'm old enough to remember that.
You are?
Yes.
Well, I'm glad you are, because I don't remember that far back. The reason for this is that there are issues that are brewing under, in our, legislative and our political process where we have a recall petition that's being requested right now. Recall was never in the town charter. We have gone and made slight changes to the wording of select board instead of selectmen. We are due for a review by the residents, current residents, because our residents that were reviewing it back in 94 are no longer around. And what I think, this needs a refresh. It needs to be addressed with some of these peripheral issues that are coming up on town meeting citizens petitions. So that's the main point here, because this is back, I think it was set up, what, in 1949?
Yes.
And that's before my time, too.
And I was a year old.
Yeah, I know. But the thing is that this is a issue that has been discussed many times, and I've discussed it with Pat Fraser, John Zavaglia, because this was an issue 3-4 years ago, and it's continuing. It's nothing has been adopted or restated in the current town charter. So I would suggest that a lot of the towns in our area have a 5-year, 10-year review cycle for their governance. And I think this town deserves one right now because we have a totally new population since 1994. So that's the whole point behind it.
Thank you. David, questions?
It's not, may I make some comments, Dan, in addition to some questions?
Yeah, not just if you had any question for clarification, but if you want to make a comment, please do so.
No for clarification. I hear Mark saying that the Town Manager Act and the way we govern in Danvers should be totally reviewed because it hasn't been reviewed for a while. The United States Constitution has been in business for a while and hasn't been reviewed for a while. The mere passage of time is not, in my view, a legitimate reason for having this Town Manager Act committee to update and review. I have been here. I was alive in 1949. I have watched this government in Danvers function my entire adult life. And I go different places in Massachusetts, and they ask me where I'm from, and I say I'm from Danvers, and they say, wow, you have a very well-run town. We do have a very well-done town. I don't think that there is any reason, and I think it would be very dangerous and potentially upsetting to the excellent administration of this town now as it is. And I would ask you, Mark, what parts of the Town Manager Act do you think requires some attention? Be specific. What do you think needs attention?
Specifically, there are several items. One of them is going to be a warrant article in regard to the recall petition, and that one, we discussed it last year, and you even suggested that that should be incorporated into the Town Manager Act or the Legislative Act.
Did I do that?
Yes, and I appreciated that because that was good.
Also, I can't imagine me doing that, but if you say I did.
Well, I appreciate.
We're not talking recall yesterday yet, and that's another thing that I absolutely, totally think would be deadly for this town. But
Well,
let's stick to the subject.
yeah.
the review would take into account all the changes that have happened over the years because our legislative dictate from the state has changed. Our Constitution for the state of Massachusetts is currently being updated. So we need to be in the 21st century instead of 1949.
My final question is, Mike, what precisely do you think requires attention in the Town Manager Act as it exists? The recall thing you've mentioned, is there anything else?
The other thing is that there are committees that are set up, and very few are set up by the Board of Selectmen. In several towns in the area, the planning board is elected instead of being appointed. That's a reflection.
So you want to change the management style of the Town Manager Act and give the Board of Selectmen more authority?
Well, yeah.
That's what you just said.
Yeah.
Well, then how much are you going to pay us?
Oh, my God, here we go, salary issues.
Seriously.
I knew it.
Seriously.
Are you in a union or something?
I am. Matt?
Yeah, to your point of representation, so I know other towns, for example, Needham, where there are many elected officials, for example, the tax assessor. There are more involvement by the voters in deciding who will actually serve them. If not to nothing personal against our town manager, but if the town manager has the final authority to decide who serves on boards and commissions, I think it's kind of not necessarily the true democratic process. So I would be in favor of at least forming the committee to evaluate. They may not return any suggestions at all, but it's 30 years seems like a long time, and I do think that it should be like a living document that's not just static. My fellow member Mills mentioned the U.S. Constitution. There's amendments to that that's been updated over the years, so that's not necessarily a static document. So I would be in favor of allowing the town moderator to form a committee.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Gardner?
A couple of questions. One is, as both of the former comments made allusion to the Constitution, the petition you're speaking about that we'll hear is akin to an amendment. It is the process by which they can change or augment the town charter or the Town Manager Act through the course of town meeting saying we think this should be changed. So we have a mechanism right now. I also agree with the chairman's position that we should wait till the till the current process flows through and get professionals who see across the state what's going on, recommendations for which we may say this is a perfect reason to change. Yes, there are things in the town charter that we might want to tweak, like residency, or like the fact that we have to start on a certain time at a certain date for town meeting.
Elections,
So
right.
there are some minor tweaks. That's not debate. But one question I have is, again, understanding that these are turned in close to the deadline and that they had not had the opportunity for for legal review. Is it the authority of the town moderator to set this committee up? Or is it the authority of the town, or is it the authority of the select board?
This is consistent
Yeah,
with the way.
there was precedent before, that's
Okay,
how they
precedent,
did it.
but-
Peter Zook appointed the last.
Okay. I think we should wait. But again, this only says town meeting grants the authority for the town moderator to do so, and presuming it's going to continue on with the town manager, it's at her discretion to go ahead and do that, and the discretion might be wait until after the process that we're already in the middle of happens. Theoretically, but I agree with Mr. Mills, Judge Mills. Time is not an indicator of a problem. Problems are an indicator of a problem. If you think there are things, specific things that need to change because they're outdated, because our world has changed, specific things, I'd like to hear the specific things, not just let's throw open the gates and review everything. We don't throw open the gates and review the Constitution. We amend things that we think are wrong or need revision.
Well, my whole point behind this is a government for the people and by the people. And by the people, I mean town meeting members and the town moderator, because that is the legislative body that reviews and approves all spending and legislative actions. So I know that everybody's resistant to opening up the books and looking under the sheets, but we need...
I think it's more of a matter of timing, Mark.
Well,
Would two of us say we should wait for the strategic Danvers plan to come before us? They're interviewing the citizens, the voters, to get their input. And I think it would be remiss to charge ahead without that information.
this should be in two paths, divergent, because one path will give you one result and the review will give you another result.
Questions from the audience? Bill?
Again, Bill Bradstreet, town meeting member, precinct 1. I think there should be a review of everything in town periodically. Someone decide if it's weekly, monthly, yearly, 3 years, but do a review because everything changes. It's changing all the time. We want to be proactive as opposed to being reactive because we missed the launching of our boat.
Thank you. What's the consensus on the board on Article 35?
Mr. Chairman, I see that there's some differences in opinion on the board. I suggest I'm going to move that we forward this with no recommendation.
Is there a second?
Okay, I'll second.
Interesting, okay, no recommendation. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
No.
Aye. Mark, thank you for all the work you're doing for the community. Mr. Town Manager, next. And the sequence
the
of events.
Fourth and final citizens petition, that is the recall provision that was presented last year, and the petitioner is present.
Okay. Introduce yourself to the folks at home, please.
Hi, how's it going? Mike Trainer, Precinct 5 Town Meeting Member. I'm here to present the recall petition that we reviewed last year. I did make a couple changes to it based off some feedback that was brought up during the Finance Committee meeting. I know someone had mentioned that they didn't think it would be good for the town. I actually feel the opposite. I don't feel comfortable that we don't have one. This particular one, as written, is actually really restrictive because you can't recall someone out of office based off the way they vote unless there's a conflict of interest in there. This is more if you have someone in office that makes citizens feel uncomfortable, does something in their personal life, does not represent the town in a positive manner. I feel that the citizens should have a choice to get them out of office. Now, if you look, a lot of other cities and towns have this. This one is particularly hard to execute. So basically what you have to do is you get 350 signatures, it goes to the town clerk. All that does is starts a time clock, right? Because you want it to be difficult. We don't want to be having election after election after election. So if it's determined that this person is being recalled for a legitimate reason, then you have 20 business days, which is 4 weeks, to get 20% of the voters' signatures. So based off the last election, that would be 4,328 signatures. You'd obviously have to get more than that too, because they're not all going to be certified. So that is incredibly hard to do. So so most of the town has to be on board that this person should not be representing the town on any given board, whether it be school committee, select board, housing authority, you name it. So like I said, that's not easy to do. At that point, the person does have, at any point, they do have the option to resign. If they don't, then we set an election where if over 50% of the town votes to recall this person, we recall them. My fear is you could have someone, in the future that just doesn't represent the town in a good way or makes citizens feel uncomfortable, right? And that person can sit there for 3 years. And someone had made the comment at the Finance Committee meeting last year, well, they just sit at the end of the table, no one listens to them. Well, depending on what they're saying, people can listen to them. And they can upset people. And the media can listen. As a community, you all know, we've been through a lot, right? And we're rebuilding at this point now. The last thing I would want to go back is to kind of just be shown in a negative light, which is what could happen. And it could go on for 3 years because we have no recourse. And the thing is, I'm going to tell you right now, it's good. At some point, we could get to a point where we need to do something, and there's going to be no system in place. Okay, and I know other people have talked about putting this in the town charter. I mean, recently there were 11 cities and towns that did it the same way, this citizens petition, home rule petition. Like I said, this is probably one of the hardest I've seen. I've read a lot of cities and towns. Most of them, you can actually have someone removed from office based off how they vote. You can't do that with this one, okay? It's a protection that's in place. This might be something we never use. And like I said, you know how hard it is to get that number of signatures in that short a time. I mean, those of you that have worked on the CPA probably have an idea. It's not easy. So you're really going to have everyone, most of the town, feel that this person should be recalled. Questions? Yep.
Go to Selectman ask first.
Yeah, excuse me, I didn't call you.
Oh, sorry.
Wait for the chair to recognize you, thank you. And the board will ask questions first, then we'll go to the public. Mike, how many signatures to get this kicked off?
So based off the last, so to start the time clock, it's 350, which is actually on the higher end.
What percentage is that of the registered voters?
The 350, I mean, the 350 just starts this time clock, so that
Mr. Chairman.
is.
Yes.
I think it's
Yeah,
about
so
1.5.
like Saugus is 50.
I'm not
Reading
interested in
Su-
Saugus.
Okay,
I
So
believe
it's
it's about 1.5%.
1.5%
yeah.
should make the determination
That's
that
no-
somebody should be removed.
Not really.
Start the
because all it
process,
does
start
is
the
sta-
process.
So that's
So
like
if somebody's got a grudge, it's
Yep.
very easy to get your neighbors and friends worked up into a frenzy.
It's not a frenzy, so
Yeah,
all
it
that
would
does,
be.
let me just explain. All it does is it starts the process. It starts a time clock. So you, at some point, you have to start that 20-day time clock, right? Because you want this to be different. That's all that 350 things. So that's like you guys setting the date that you can pull papers, right? That's all that 350 signatures are. It just initiates the process with the town clerk. So that's like saying, okay, we're going to open it up, so if you want to run for the select board, you can pull out papers March 5th. That's what that 350 signatures does. The 4,328, that's when you go out, like, I'm running for select board, like, you have to get 50 signatures. Well, this one, you don't even have a lot of time. You only have 4 weeks, right? And you have to get 4,500 signatures is basically, well, 4,328, but you're going to have to get more because not all of them are going to certify. So it's not an easy process.
Okay, thanks for the
So,
clarification.
yeah, I
Thank you.
wouldn't get hung up on the 350. That just starts the process.
Okay, thank you. David?
I have no questions, but I do have comments when it's comment
Yeah, we'll
time.
do questions right now. Come
Yep.
back to you. Matt, question?
No.
Gardner, questions?
Yep, so obviously, last year I presented this to the board. Michael and I have talked, and he's tweaked it based on some language that came from Finance Committee. This is the nuclear option. This is if someone is convicted of a crime.
Is this a question?
No, yes, it is getting to it. And so the tweaks he's made, I support. 350 gets you to go to the clerk to get the language for a petition. And the thing that was changed and very important to me was the fact that you cannot be recalled based on your work as a body, as a member. Obviously, this came up when we had the hockey incidents, and people wanted to go to the school committee and force people off based on their work.
Mm-hmm.
You can't be forced off for your legitimate work on a body that you're elected to. But you asked the question about the 350. It's 3 tiers. 350 gets you to the point where you can do a petition. A petition requires 4,500 or something, just less than
He
that.
clarified that.
Okay, and then it goes to a vote, and a majority has to approve. This is not an easy thing to do, and I guess the question was that besides the language that we presented last year, what changes have you made to this?
So like, for example, the town moderator wasn't listed on there.
Okay.
And that would be a town-wide position. And I believe Housing Authority was not listed on there. And then also, the only other change made is I changed it to 20 business days that you have to get the 4,328 signatures. And that number could change. So it's however many people are registered at the last town election. It doesn't matter who votes in it, just the number of people registered voters. So that would change every year, that number. It's probably going to go up, I would guess, as we gain residents. Right?
Thank you. So basically, you broadened it to be any elected body.
Not any elected, like town meeting wouldn't be a townwide.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I
Thank you
don't
for the
see
clarification.
the point of having
Okay.
a recall for that. I just clarified because it said holds a townwide office, but then it left a few people out, so.
Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from the audience? Question, please. Introduce yourself.
Rebecca Franke. My question is just to clarify one last time. So as it stands today, an elected official could be convicted of a crime, charged with a crime, be a criminal, and they could carry out their years of service?
That is correct.
Thank you. Anyone else?
This is a question for Mike, but Amy Ciancarelli, Precinct 5. If we were to do an election...
Direct your questions to the chair, please.
My apologies.
It's okay.
If we were to do an election recall and got to that process, do we have an idea of the cost of another election for the town?
Kathy?
I believe the cost is between $10,000 and $12,000.
Thank you. Comments, David?
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate the amount of effort, Michael, that you have put into this. Genuinely, I do. I have been an appointed or elected official for 54 years, federal, state, and local. I have never been challenged in my work or accused of anything. And if I were, I would be devastated. If I were an elected member of the Danvers School Committee, and I watched the hockey scandal very carefully, because I am a lawyer, and there were 2 lawyers on there, and I knew what the lawyers did, and I read all of the papers. They did superb work, and yet were challenged and criticized by people because of that hockey thing that really embarrassed us all. To have a recall provision that even could be started against decent, hardworking people in public office scares me. I don't think it's a good thing. And I was against this, was it last year that we considered this recall petition thing? I think I was against it. Got to check with Mark to make sure that I was against it then. I'm against it now. We have regular elections in this town, and people turn over all of the time. To some extent, and I don't mean to be disrespectful to you or anybody else who is in favor of this, it feels to me somewhat as a knee-jerk reaction to the hockey scandal and also to some of the controversy nationwide and locally about the COVID vaccines and attitude and management that the town did. And so I respect the energy. I suspect the energy comes from places that I don't think are a legitimate place for my energy, and I don't think that we should do this. And like last year, I will oppose and ask the FinCom and the town meeting to oppose, not disrespecting your work at all. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, do you mind if I just respond to that? So I have no motive whatsoever. It's not related to the school committee in any way. I just think it's something the town should have in place just in case. So in the example that you provided, again, that's the way that you're voting, and you're voting, you know, what you think is in the best interest. So this particular recall, those people could not be recalled for this. We wouldn't have an election based off the way this is worded. So like I guess someone could start getting 350 signatures, but then at that point, it goes to the town clerk. There's language in here that you cannot be recalled based off how you're voting. So it would go to Kathy, it would go to town council. So that wouldn't have been a recall.
If 350 citizens established a recall petition against me, the very thought of 350 of my colleagues and neighbors and friends challenging me to the legitimacy of this office would be a very, very grievous, uncomfortable, terrible thing for me at this stage in my life.
May I clarify something too, just based on the language that's here? Because I think, I want to be very careful. There is no circumstance where a town clerk or a town attorney would be asked to evaluate and weigh in on the legitimacy of a recall. It's a stop-go. And the language itself says that the voters themselves determine whether the grounds are adequate. So I just want to be very clear, Kathy Ellsworth won't be asked to determine whether it's appropriate to move past 350. We're not putting her in that spot.
Thank you.
Matt, comments?
Yeah, I feel that I am or would be a target of this recall, and for that reason, I do not support the article.
Gardner, comments?
The world has changed dramatically in the past 10 years in national politics. Not so much local. We like to think Danvers is a small, quiet town. But you look at some of the things that are going on in national politics, some of the abhorrent behavior that I'm sure David would find horrible and abhorrent. We've had discussions, so I know that to be a fact. This is a mechanism, this is a tool. It's not to point out one person, and it says specifically in Section 2, you cannot be recalled for doing the job you were hired to do. Whether you like the way I do my job, whether you like the votes I take or not, that's not the question. This is not a knee-jerk, I don't like the way you voted. This is, you've done something so egregious. You've been committed of a crime. You've been accused of something horrific. And yes, everyone's innocent until proven guilty, but you wouldn't want a school committee member who's been accused of egregious child abuse. We just don't have a tool. And it's not against any specific member of this board or any other board or the school committee. Yes, did the discussion come up during those times? How do we do this? We don't have a mechanism. We don't have that tool. This is just saying, this is a really high threshold. It's not just a bunch of people in a coffee house saying, I don't like the fact that he voted that way or she did this thing. It is 350 people have to get together and say, can we even start that process? And then 4,500 to say, we want an election. And then the election goes forward and the majority of people say, I agree, of the people who voted, that this person's behavior is so abhorrent, they should not represent the town or make decisions. If we had someone who was a tax dodge and convicted of it, would you want them making decisions about your taxation? If you had someone convicted of child abuse, would you want them on the school committee? And I don't mean to pick on them. If it was, are their actions outside the work they were elected to do so bad that they shouldn't represent the town? I think we need a mechanism. I think we need a tool. This is a tool to that end, and it has such high thresholds, I cannot envision it being enacted. I can't think of anything that's happened in this town in the past 25 years, 30 years, that would rise to this occasion, but I want to know that if something does, we have the ability to take action. And not we, not this board, not the boards that the person sits on, the electorate get to say, I don't think this person should be on here any longer and serve out the remainder of their 2, 3, 5-year term, whatever it is. So.
Thank you. So, listening to Gardner and David and Matt even,
Yep.
if this petition said that we would have recalls for specific reasons, and they were named, I would be 100% supportive.
So,
Because I think we could come up with a list of egregious activities where somebody would be recalled, and I would even be willing to have a lower threshold to get that person removed from representing the community. This is open-ended.
So the way this is written, right, if you go and look at all these home rule petitions, the language between a lot of them is the same. And the removal process in this is word for word approved by another house. I mean, it's literally word for word. It's copied. It went through the legislature, it was approved, it was signed by the governor. So I figured this is well vetted. If other cities and towns are using this language, I think it's good for us.
Thank you. What's the will of the board? Oh, I'm sorry. Questions? Mark?
This, I don't know if I seldom agree with Mr. Trask, but I believe this is the one time that I wholeheartedly agree with your assertion that this is a mechanism that we do not have, and we have rejected opening up the Town Manager Act, and we need something like this just in case. This is not going to go away but this is a method of having a special election, basically. That's what you're doing. You're scheduling a special election to either say, yes, he or she belongs there, or no, they don't belong there. And the public, the registered voters, will have the final say. Not you guys, or ladies, but it's not an unheard of requirement, but I still believe that it should be in the charter as well, but thank you.
Thank you. Bill?
Bill Bradstreet, town meeting member, precinct 1. Again, let's be proactive, not reactive. Please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, what's the will of the board?
Move that we forward with an unfavorable recommendation.
Second? Discussion? All in favor of the motion? Aye. Opposed?
No.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, unfavorable. Yes. Okay, Mr. Town Manager, what's next on the agenda?
Next is the election of officers. This is a list that's prepared by the chair
Can I
each year.
just interrupt? We do have members from the school department. Are they here for a specific issue? Warrant article?
Well, it's the second half of the special town meeting vote that was taken.
Can we go?
I think that's fair.
I think that's fair.
Although I'm sure they enjoyed the discussion. So Article,
We don't want to chase Mr. Bauer away just yet.
Article 36, I'm not going to click all the way ahead, but
That's okay.
this is the secondary piece to the appropriation from free cash into the 23 operating budget to close the books. We set up the special revenue fund, the Special Education Stabilization Fund last year, seeded that account with $150,000 in free cash. The idea being that it would be available as a backstop and a resource when the circuit breaker account is running hot and we need to be able to close our books. That was set up by town meeting last year, and the way that stabilization fund works is that appropriations go in by town meeting, and they can come out during the fiscal year by votes of the school committee and the select board. So the recommendation this year, based on the free cash certification we had, is to add $600,000 to that, which will give us a total of $750,000 in that account. And there is no recommendation to draw any funds out of that account this time.
Okay, questions? Gardner?
No, I don't have any questions, thank you.
Matt?
No, also,
David?
Yes, please. Through you, may I ask the manager, in 6 bullet points, can you summarize the obligation of the town of Danvers to support and transport out-of-town students into our system and specify the amount that costs the taxpayers every year?
Yeah, I can try. We also have some experts in the room. But while one of the experts is making their way to the podium, I will say the town of Danvers has a legal obligation, and you may argue a moral obligation, to provide adequate education for all of the kids who live in town. And when a student when it is determined through partnership of the parents and the school staff that a student would be best served out of district in a specialized environment, the town is obligated to cover the tuition associated with that student and the transportation costs associated with that student. In the years coming out of the pandemic, Danvers, like a lot of communities, has seen increasing costs associated with those placements, both the number of the placements and the severity of the needs that are being addressed. And on top of that, this year, the state approved a 14% tuition increase that these facilities can charge back to towns and cities, which we had to absorb and have to prepare to absorb in the FY24 budget. The out-of-district special education costs are paid for in the current year by the town or city, and the state does have a reimbursement system in place so that any costs above a base threshold, which I believe is around $45,000 a year, 49,500, the state will pay back 75% of eligible costs above and beyond that. The issue is that reimbursement comes a full year later than the costs were incurred, so that if you're seeing year-over-year increases, your reimbursements are delayed and insufficient to cover the cost. So the concept last year was to have this essentially a backstop in place. We've tried historically to carry about a year's worth of circuit breaker, so we always want to have the most recent years held in reserve to smooth the cost moving forward. But given where we've been the last 2 or 3 years, we've had to draw that circuit breaker total down beyond our practice, which we spent a lot of time talking about that Saturday at the budget workshop, just in terms of how we're strategizing over the next year or two to be prepared for that, including lobbying through the MMA and the MASS with our state delegation and the governor-elect did include supplemental funding in her supplemental budget to try to address some of these costs. So that was more than 6 bullets, and I do want to give the superintendent an opportunity to respond as well.
And now, this stabilization fund would be really meant just for tuitions for out-of-district placements. So it would be students that live in Danvers that we would be placing out for specialized instruction at private schools. So this wouldn't really be for the tuition, for the transportation.
Thank you, Mary.
Could I ask a follow-up? What was the total OOD, not including transportation, that we paid for tuition out of district last year? Roughly.
Was it around 9 mil? Was it around last year or this year? Like this year, I think we're projected 9 million.
9 million? So,
I have it right.
yes. So, because I have some knowledge, it's not unusual to hear about a $300,000 tuition bill for a child who needs services we can't provide in town. Which is one of the points I was making on the tech side.
Oh, actually, it's not. Okay, it's only, actually, it is $6 million that we'll be paying projected for the school year for out-of-district placements.
6 or 9, what's?
Six million, 6,633,319 is what we're projecting.
And that's just for tuition, and then transportation on top of that. Do you have a rough idea what that transportation cost would be? It's a leading question.
Transportation is, looks like $1,680,573.
So basically 8.2, roughly, total for out-of-district costs. Thank you.
For how many students?
69 students.
Thank you. All of a sudden, the University of Maryland at 59,000 sounds like a bargain. David, did you get your questions answered? Thank you. Matt?
Yeah, just to the 6 million figure, so that's something that we have to cover up front, and then we would get approximately 4.5 million from the state to as a reimbursement.
So in a normal year, we set the budget for the fiscal year based on the kids we know we have and assumptions that we're making based on historical trends. If we end up with more students than that, that's where the circuit breaker historically is used to capture that additional cost, because we already have a budget that's been approved by town meeting. That circuit breaker system works really, really well when the costs ebb and flow over time, which is historically what we've seen. But what we've been talking about a lot at the Mass Municipal Association Board of Directors meetings and at the Superintendent Associations is that towns like Danvers and Andover and even cities like Newton are seeing those costs increase year after year after year coming out of the pandemic for legitimate need. But that system collapses on itself if you don't have peaks and valleys. It's meant to smooth the peaks and valleys, and if you're just climbing the mountain, eventually the reimbursement dries up, and then that's why at this point a lot of towns and cities are saying there needs to be a legislative, if this is a temporary situation, we need a legislative fix to get through it. If this is a permanent situation, then we need to rethink the entire funding mechanism, because it's not going to work.
Right, and just, if I may, just a follow-up to that. So this is where we send these students out of district, is there a way to reduce the cost by keeping them, providing the services that they need and provide them here in Danvers?
We do provide services in district, and it's, I think it's a constant. I think each year and I don't want to speak for the schools, but we're evaluating the offerings each year to try to determine if we make a small investment here, can we keep 2 or 3 more students? Some of the needs that we're describing, though, are so acute that no town or city would try to stand up a program to address some of those needs. So some of those kids are going to end up in a facility with staffing that is trained and can meet the needs of those kids. But we certainly should be trying to keep the students where we could assemble a small program and keep them in district.
Okay, great. Thanks for that clarification. And just one last thing, is 600,000 the allocation, is that sufficient? Or should it be higher?
That's what we can do this year to stay within the financial policies in terms of keeping back the 1% of net operating. And I think, so we put the 150 in last year and made a policy decision not to recommend drawing that down. We're going to be leaning a little more heavily on circuit breaker. And we worked very closely with the schools during the budget process to try to figure out how to close out 23 and be prepared for 24. But this gives us a backstop in case 6 months from now we need to come back and talk to the school committee and the select board.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. Gordon, you all set?
This is more of I did some research on this based on our discussions with Essex Tech, and the numbers I had were similar. And if we presume 8.2 for the out-of-district students, for the 69 out-of-district students, we have a responsibility for the first 49,500 for each student. That's 3.4 million, leaving 4.8 million, of which we would get 75% reimbursement for eligible, so up to 3.6 million. So while we're paying 8.2, we're only getting back 3.6 from the state at best. So it's an uphill climb, and this money here is to cover the fact that, just like we do in special town meeting, we have bills that come in after the fact. Well, we get our payment after the fact, a year after the fact, and this is to kind of cover that time frame. So I'm in support of this.
Thank you. Anyone in the audience? What's the will of the board?
I move we forward Article 36 with a favorable recommendation.
Is there a second?
Second.
I think I heard a second.
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed, none, thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Town Manager, can we go to number 9?
Article 9?
Yeah, number 9.
Well, you're-
Remember that record.
I have to jump back
I
now.
do too.
You're throwing me a curveball. Yes, that's a great idea. That's actually, I think it's coming up. We'll go right there now.
Thank you. That would be you, Dan.
What page is that?
This would be on page 13.
13, yeah. So number 9 is Historic District Designation Bylaw to see if the town will vote to designate 42 Summer Street as a single historic district or take any other action thereon. And please introduce yourself for the folks at home.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Dan Gagnon, the chairman of the Historic District Commission. I can talk briefly about this article. I know I had discussed with the board at a meeting back in February, kind of the overview, the longer story of this. The reasons for this action is, as of now, there's a demolition permit that has been put under delay by the Preservation Commission of this home. The delay expires May 13th. The Preservation Commission, in putting this delay in place, had a series of meetings, public hearings, that found the building worthy of preservation and, well, historically significant, and then worthy of preservation. The Historic District Commission began this process in that designating a structure as a historic district is the only way to save it permanently, potentially, from demolition. This would be a single parcel historic district. It is not an entire neighborhood. The home is very significant for several reasons. It's one of only about 250 first period houses that still exist in the United States, so that alone really brings it to a significance. It's the home of Timothy Pickering, who's one of the founding fathers of the United States, the Secretary of State for George Washington, John Adams, the Secretary of War, one of our first congressmen once they created the Congress, and going so forth there. With this as a whole, the Historic District had a series of meetings starting in April through until a recommendation was submitted to the select board in December. With these meetings, there's been more than 9 public meetings. There's been a public hearing at the state level done by the Mass Historical Commission. We had our own local public hearing. We had originally studied 2 properties, only are suggesting 1 to move forward, as there was another home that was under delay that we decided not to move forward on. With this property, the property owner had asked us to narrow our scope to what was originally just the first 2/3, roughly, of the lot, because they wanted to split the lot. And they had said that if they split the lot and we did not include in our study the rear portion, that they would not oppose this becoming a historic district. Since I was before the board in February, the house is listed for sale. I have really no details to report other than it's now on Zillow as under agreement. That is really the only fact that I have in hand that I can update you with. I do not know what the present course is, but that the delay is still in place in that this owner or a new owner, if all the paperwork were to go through in time, could still demolish the house after May 13th. So that situation, the threat is still there. The threat has not changed, but there's just a sign in front of the house now. I'd be happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chairman, about this. I appreciated that the Select Board in February had voted to include it in the warrant here, and it has had large public support from neighbors. We have a petition that was submitted to us by 150 people who live in that broader Summer Street, some of the side streets neighborhood. We had those speaking in favor of this property at the public hearing, and who have attended some of our historic district meetings even subsequently, just because it was an item of discussion on the agenda. Our decision to forward it had already been made, but of course just keeping up to date with the process. And in February, there were 4 or 5 of us here, some from the commission and some just members of the public who were in support as well.
Dan, do you see a reason that somebody would stand up town meeting floor and object to this? I mean, give me a con.
With knowing that the property owner had made this agreement not to oppose it, in some cases when a property is nominated for potentially being a historic district, if it's a developer who wants to flatten it, they are of course the ones opposed it. But in this case, the one who would be most likely to oppose it has said publicly that they do not oppose it. And if they don't oppose it, then no, I can't really imagine a thought there, or a reason there.
Thank you. Gardner?
No, I listened to the presentation previously, and all my questions were answered then. I'm in support of this.
Thank you. Matt?
Yes, I attended last year a public hearing in this very room, and it kind of, I don't know if it was specific to this property, or maybe I'm thinking about the one on Maple Street. But is there a cost to the town to the current owner? Does it reduce or impact the value of the property with having it in this district?
It does not directly. Typically with historic districts, the studies say it increases property values. That is a case-by-case basis. I'm not really sure I can answer with a concrete answer to that question.
That's fine. And because I'm just thinking, for what reason would somebody oppose this? Why would a town meeting member oppose this? And that's the first thing that comes to my mind, that there's some cost that the town would have to pay out. But I think this is a last-ditch effort, and that the building is definitely worthy of preservation, historically significant. So kudos to you for putting this together. I know you're very meticulous in your presentation, so thank you for this effort.
Thank you.
David? Questions, comments?
Yes, please, Dan, yeah, thank you. Dan, you present beautifully and with your candor very credibly. My concern is this fair to the current owner? What will be the disadvantage to the current owner? I'm kind of startled about the property under agreement that you mentioned tonight. When someone asks who would oppose at the town meeting, if all of a sudden the current owner got a, group of town meeting members together and said, this is not fair to me for this reason. I'm asking you, is this fair to the current owner, as far as you know?
Well, what I would say in terms of the agreement that the commission had reached with the current owner was that originally was the entire property that was being studied for inclusion. And the reason for that was a historic reason, that one of the other reasons that Timothy Pickering is incredibly famous has to do with farming. And so at first the commission, well, if part of the reason he's famous is because of farming, like, why would you not include his farm? Was sort of the thought process. And we did come to that agreement to exempt, to not include the new lot that was split off. And they said at the public hearing that they would not oppose it if that agreement was made. I mean, that was a publicly stated agreement. It was at a public hearing that was held in the Gordon Room. They said this on DCAT. I mean, that would kind of be going back on a pretty public agreement.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dan.
All right, anyone in the audience? Mark?
The only question I have is, the question's been raised a couple of times. Who's going to own that building? At what cost? Because what you're doing is you're splitting off half of the lot, and that's going to be sold as an addition.
Mark, to the chair, please.
Then that'll be sold to the addition that's, planned for the nursing home. However, I still haven't heard a number. Is it going to cost the town any money? Is it going to cost the owner, current owner, any money? Or is he coming out whole at the end?
He's already spent money to buy the property and to go through the process to split it off. He obviously feels he'll make a profit by combining it with the other piece of property. So he's all in favor, whatever he can get out of the deal.
Yeah, but now it's going to be under preservation.
It is under preservation according to his agreement.
Okay, so this sounds like money, everybody's going to make some money.
Well, I don't know, make money, everybody, but we preserve the building, that's important. Dan, anything else before we vote?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. What's the will of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I move we move this forward with a favorable recommendation.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Dan. See you at FinCom? Mr. Town Manager,
Thank you, Mr.
you
Chairman.
can go back on track.
All right. Article number 1 in the annual town meeting is the election of officers. Again, that list is typically prepared by the chair closer to town meeting. We do not have the list with us tonight. But we would be looking for a vote to move this forward to the FinCom.
Is there a motion?
Yes,
So-
motion.
Favorable.
Favorable, yes. All in favor? Aye.
Articles 2, 3, and 4, no votes are required on these because votes were taken during our budget workshop, but if the board wanted to make comment or ask questions or change those, that certainly is possible now, but those are related to the town budget, the electric budget, and the Essex Tech assessment.
Thank you. And after that?
After that, Article 5 is a standing article each year. It authorizes the treasurer collector to utilize the tools laid out in Mass General Law for her to collect the taxes.
Any comments, questions? No.
No,
Move the question.
move with favorable recommendation.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you.
Article 6.
I'm sorry, just for clarity, I think we skipped over voting for the last one.
No, we had already had the presentation and on those three.
We voted on Saturday. For
We
this.
voted,
Oh, okay.
we voted
Thank
on
you. All right,
Saturday.
thank you.
Article 6 is the annual report that was distributed to town meeting members earlier this year, and this vote by the Select Board, FinCom, and town meeting essentially accepts that report.
Is there a motion?
Favorable? move forward for you.
All in favor? Aye, thank you.
Next, we'll,
Second.
sorry.
David, yeah.
I'm sorry, Ken.
You seconded, right?
Number 7?
We're going to skip 7 tonight. We're going to go to page 33, Article 32. That is the Transportation Network funding. So these, the state remits to towns and cities a portion of the proceeds from hail riding services. And the practice in Danvers for the 3 or 4 years that we've been receiving these funds is to deposit them into the senior center revolving fund to support.
You're on number 32?
We're on number 32.
So, members, the language should state, to see if the town will vote to see what sum the town will vote to appropriate from the Transportation Network Fund or take any other action thereon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There was a typo in the warrant.
Mr. Chairman, I move we forward this with a favorable recommendation based on your clarification.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you.
Next is Article 30 on page 31. That is the annual vote to approve the use of the revolving accounts that are utilized by various departments in town for things like Fun Club, water use mitigation, which is it's a DEP requirement administered by the DPW, transportation, et cetera. So it just as an annual reminder, we are setting the upper limit of spending in these revolving accounts, but the funds have to collect revenue in order to be able to expend out of them. We're getting close. I would note the child care program is now at $940,000. A long goal of David Mountain after starting this program years and years ago was to establish it in all 5 schools. Wildly popular, very cost effective and affordable for families, and it's close to becoming $1 million program.
The waterway dredging, though, went down. If I'm reading it right. It went up. Fiscal '23 was 165, you're not exceeding 100.
That's the way I read it.
Is it backwards?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, that's a typo. Last year's was 65,000, this year's 100.
65 last year, thank you. And number 2, transportation, this year, fiscal '23 was 150. How much are you asking for this year? Is the same 150?
Same.
Same 150. It's up in the body. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else, Mr. Manager, on this one?
No, thank you, Redden.
Questions from the audience?
Questions? When we
Yep.
receive donations for earmarked for certain items, such as the K-9, does that offset the budget, or does it just augment their opportunity?
So there's no appropriation that's made. Town meeting is setting the spending authority. So
Right.
if the K-9 program receives 0 grants or donations, they cannot spend anything. What this says is that if they
Oh, if
receive
they get it.
40,000 in
Okay.
donations, they can only expend up to 20.
Okay. Mr. Chair,
Yep, go ahead.
no other questions. I move we forward this with a favorable recommendation.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you.
Coming up on the close, the last lineup here, if you turn to page 34 in your warrants, we have Articles 36 through 39. There's a typo on the screen. It's 36, 37, 38, and 39 is the OPEB trust. These are combination of trust funds and stabilization funds that we generally appropriate into each year.
Bless you.
The general stabilization fund over the last few years has become the town's primary. It's the bulk of our unassigned fund balance, the town's rainy day fund. Based on our free cash certification, we're recommending a small appropriation into that fund of $100,000. Article 38, debt stabilization. Everybody's pretty familiar with this. This is the stabilization fund that we use to manage our the tax-supported debt costs associated with projects. The last major project was the Smith School, so we try to appropriate funds into this from free cash when we can, and we draw down based against a funding plan that's generally put in place when the bonds are issued and gets adjusted over time. And the final is the OPEB trust fund. We made an effort to several years ago, one of our financial goals was to try to move the capital outlay and the OPEB trust fund appropriations into the tax levy from free cash, because these really are sort of ongoing funding commitments that we've made. The majority of our OPEB trust fund is now funded through the tax levy, but we do supplement the tax levy appropriation with $250,000 for free cash as part of our funding plan. So we can take those one at a time, and we're happy to take questions.
Questions from the board? Audience? No? One at a time, please.
Mr. Chairman, I move we forward Article 37 with a favorable recommendation.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, I move we forward Article 38 with a favorable recommendation.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, aye. Next.
Mr. Chairman, I move we forward Article 39 with a favorable recommendation.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. Mr. Town Manager, is there anything else that we can attack at the moment?
Do we, I can't remember each year, I'm going to ask you to vote on this, because in order for it technically to be in the warrant, it should have a vote from the select board. So we're going to vote to include this. This final article in every town meeting warrant is there in case amendments are made to the budget or to the spending plan on the floor of town meeting that would require an offsetting adjustment. So it's important to have it there as a mechanism for town meeting to use, but at this point, we're not contemplating any changes. So we'd be looking to.
Is there a motion?
Move forward it favorably.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay. Anything else, Steve, we can knock off in the next 10 minutes?
Let me go back through. We can, yeah, sure, let's go back to page 1. This will shorten David Lane's night, he'll be thrilled about that. If there are specific questions about these, we'll save those for Thursday, but the town's portion of the Chapter 90 program this year is $877,000, $877,025. And so we vote for this through the special town meeting rather than the annual, so that the Streets Division can start working on roadways before July 1st.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, questions? No, go ahead.
I move we forward Article 3 with a favorable recommendation.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you.
Article 5, I'm going to suggest that we save for Public Works.
Yep.
That is related to the trash. Article 7, we'll have the Electric Division here to present that on Thursday. We will have the IT Director present on Thursday. Article 12, the streets.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah,
through
go ahead.
you. Article 10 is a consolidation. But then there's Article 11, which seems to be further IT. Why not consolidate those two into a single warrant article and,
There's no.
or at least be prepared for the question?
We generally will, like, we funded fiber as a standalone project, so depending on the nature of the work, sometimes we'll fund it as its own capital project, sometimes we fund it as part of the spending. Generally speaking, what's in the tech plan is things like the display in the room, or switches and things like that. Fiber, or in this case, this is an offsite disaster recovery model that IT is going to be implementing to phase out some of the hardware we have. The short answer is it could go either place. It's
Okay.
the same funding source, but it's here as a standalone. And we'll have the IT Director here to speak to both of those on Thursday.
Okay.
Article 12, we could
Yep.
take action on. This is, we're replacing 2 8-passenger vans for the school department. The Equipment Division worked with the schools in making this request, and they support this.
Questions?
And this is, just to clarify, this is to replace, this is not additional.
I move we forward Article 12 with a favorable recommendation.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Article 17 we can vote on, maintenance dredging. This is the amount we appropriate each year to offset some of the engineering costs that will be associated with our next dredging project, which we're inching closer and closer to.
Questions? What's the will of the board?
I move we forward Article 17 with a favorable recommendation. Can we do 14?
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
I mean, we just heard that last week.
Stephen King
Yeah, he'll be here.
will be here on Thursday.
Okay.
Wait, was that 17?
No, that
17
was 17.
was favorable.
14 we're not doing.
We're not doing.
Okay.
I don't see anything else, do you, Steve?
Sometimes we vote on drainage liability. I don't know that we need to.
Yeah, we can hold off on that.
Yeah, that only takes.
Yeah, there's a lot of
That's
water.
probably good. I think we.
What about 25?
What was 25?
Mill Pond Dam safety inspections.
Yeah, we can do the dam. Article 25,
Page 27, sorry.
27, yep.
Generally, Stephen King would be here to present this, but what I will say is that we are required to maintain the dams that are located in the town, and so there's a request for $7,500 to study the adequacy of the Mill Pond Dam.
I guess one question I have, and this is not something Stephen would answer, but more to you or Rodney through you, Mr. Chair, is this seems to be cyclical. Why do we carve this out as a warrant article?
Through you, Mr. Chair. The reason behind that is sometimes they're water articles and sometimes they're sewer articles, depending on the dam that's up for inspection.
Okay.
So we'd have to budget in both places, and it wouldn't, yeah.
Got it.
Questions? All in favor? No, so you didn't
I'll
make the
make
motion.
I'll make the motion for a favorable recommendation.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. All right. Given the time, we'll move on to closing comments. I believe the town manager?
A few brief updates. I have to switch from one pile to the other pile here. Just a couple of light items to end with. First, an acknowledgement. Danvers Electric earned honorable mention from the American Public Power Association for their 2022 Safety Awards of Excellence. It's a great accomplishment. We weren't surprised internally because of the high-quality work they do, but it's an accomplishment nonetheless to be recognized as best in class for their safety program. Anthony Calcavetta oversees the safety program for the department, so special recognition is in order for him and the work that he does. We have the townwide cleanup is scheduled for April 22nd. Sign-ups are still underway. We're trying to get more people signed up this year than last year. And if you go to the town's website and the event calendar, you can find information about how to sign up to participate in the townwide cleanup day. And in a similar vein, the Public Health Department is sponsoring a diaper drive currently for families in need. And donations can be made from the town hall, the library, the senior center, the middle school, the high school, the YMCA, and Essex Tech. And again, if you go to the town website to the events calendar, you can find more information there. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And I skipped over number 6 for a reason, because we don't have the full board with us. I had asked Select Member Bernard to gave her the opportunity to have the first choice. I didn't hear from her, so we'll be back here Thursday night. Unless you have a night that you want to pick now, we can put this off till the Thursday night.
We can wait till Thursday.
Okay, and you have a sheet with all the dates, so Thursday night, we need to commit to our attendance at FinCom. Thank you. Okay, consent calendar, please.
I move the consent calendar as presented.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Just under Select Board notes and reminders, down next to the last, town elections, I believe, will be in the field house, is that correct?
That's correct.
It says Vi Gym, but it's the field house. Thank you. Selectmen's comments and closing items. David?
Nothing, thank you, Dan.
Thank you. Matt?
That's gone again.
Gardner?
No, I have no comments, thank you.
Please remember the vets when you see them, and if there's no other business to come before the board, meeting adjourned. Good night, Danvers.